Welcome to Part 2 of the Planetary Interaction POS Fuel Production Guide. I'm your instructor, Turin Bey. Let's get back to work. Performing the same steps as we followed for robotics, here we filled out the numbers for all of our resources. Mechanical parts requires 5 units per hour, which is exactly how much a single P2 processor creates per cycle. And enriched uranium only requires 4 units per hour, which again is easily met by supplying it with enough to run a single cycle. Coolant, on the other hand, requires 8 units per hour to fuel our large POS, and so we need enough resources to run it for 2 cycles in that hour. If you've already done a little bit of pi bearing, then you're probably thinking, that's all? Anybody can do that. And you'd be absolutely correct, at least for the most part. Remember that PI production depends greatly upon the amount of time that you put into it. But yeah, this isn't a whole lot of resources, and you can do it fairly easily on some average low-sec planets, and even some good high-sec planets will do it, if you run regular 5-hour extraction cycles with maybe a few 30-minute and a few 23-hour cycles sprinkled in. Some of you more mathematically astute viewers may have also realized these values are peak values. That is to say, you only need to pull this much to go from 0 to full production. Remember that with some of these resources, we ended up with a bit of excess materials at the end of each time frame. If we keep churning out at these rates, all of these excess materials will just slowly build up because we won't need to use them. You can figure out the sustained rates using similar steps, so I won't go over them here and bore everybody to death with more math, but here are the final sustained values. As you can see, it takes even less to keep it going in the long term. Most of you will probably be making excess fuel materials, unless you're fueling multiple POSs or something like that. You can stockpile all these excess commodities for a rainy day, or sell them to other possums who aren't making their own fuels with PI. As a little side note, you can follow these steps for other production chains. For example, want to see what a nanite repair paste table looks like? You'll notice we don't have extraction rates listed because we don't need to produce X amount of nanite repair paste per hour or anything like that. But the relative amounts of each P0 resource that we need may be gleaned from the P0 column. For example, you see that we have 2 entries for noble gas, but only 1 entry for all other P0 resources. This tells us that we need to extract about the same amounts of all the other materials, but about twice as much noble gas. Any extraction above this ratio will become excess and will just build up over time. Anyway, back to our POS fuels. Our final major consideration is the logistics. We've already briefly considered the planet types that we'll need. So to recap, if we have a plasma planet available, then we could do it with as few as 2 planets, such as plasma plus storm or plasma plus gas. That requires a huge amount of materials from the single plasma planet though. So it may be easier to use 3 planets instead. For example, plasma, ice, and storm. If we don't have one of those rare plasma planets available to us, or if our local plasma is just too poor in resources or too overcrowded or something, then we can still do it with 3 other planets, barren, lava, and storm. Or go with 4 planets in lots of different combinations. For example, ice plus gas plus barren plus lava. Which combination we choose depends heavily upon how much of each resource is present on the planets available to us. Balance that with the fact that the more different planets we use, then the more time we'll need to spend moving commodities from one planet to another. For example, if we can find a single gas planet that's rich in both aqueous liquids and ionic solutions, then we can make all of our coolant there. If we have to pull those materials from 2 different planets, then we would need to take the time to move them from one planet to the other so that they can be combined to make the coolant. And because we're planning on making our POS fuel continuously, then we would need to do this hauling on a regular basis. Additionally, if our gas planet were also rich in noble gas, then we could also make all of our oxygen on that planet. We'd have 2 of our 5 final products being taken care of on just a single gas planet. On the other hand, if our gas planet were very poor in these resources, then we may need to use up more of our CPU and power grid for more extractors just to get the resources that we need. In this case, it may be better to take the time and import these resources from other planets. And that's about it, really. at least as far as the planning stages. Once all of the planning is done, about as well as can be, it's time to head out there and look out for some good candidate systems, or groups of systems, that have the planets that we need and some respectable volumes of the resources that we need. Remember to follow the basic guidelines that you've heard in the Planetary Interaction 101 class and other resources, such as looking for hotspots in proximity to one another, or maintain your extractor to processor ratios based upon your available playtime, and so on. Well, good luck out there, and let's get those POS fuels flowing.